Today we celebrate feminine beauty in this theme and era, expressed through style, elegance, posture, and presence. In the bustling decade of the 1950s, American diners became an unmistakable symbol of everyday life. And at the heart of this cultural icon were women diner waitresses, whose uniforms, warm smiles, and assured presence transformed an ordinary meal into a welcoming ritual. Their beauty was not only visual. It was carried in the elegance of their service, the rhythm of their movements, and the confidence with which they wore their attire. Step inside a neon-lit diner of 1954, and you are greeted by the comforting aroma of fresh coffee, the sound of jukebox tunes, and the sight of waitresses moving gracefully between tables. Their uniforms, clean, pressed, and carefully styled, spoke of more than practicality. They symbolized the feminine presence that anchored these spaces. Through elegance, posture, and professional charm, they gave diners a unique atmosphere that became an unforgettable part of mid-century American culture. When we speak of diner uniforms in the 1950s, we are not only describing fabric and design. We are evoking a whole spirit of feminine beauty expressed in service. This was a time when diners multiplied along highways, city streets, and small towns. And everywhere they appeared, women in uniform carried the aura of hospitality, greeting locals and travelers with the same mix of professionalism and warmth. Their beauty lay in how they combined precision with grace. They stood upright, they moved efficiently, and yet they never forgot the elegance of presence. The uniforms of that decade followed clear design lines. They were inspired by both practicality and aesthetics, balancing comfort for long hours of work with a sense of feminine style. Typically, the silhouette was modest but flattering. Short-sleeved dresses in pastel or bright, solid colors, often with white collars and cuffs. Hemlines fell just below the knee, ensuring both dignity and ease of movement. The fabrics were sturdy cotton blends, easy to wash, resistant to stains, yet able to hold crisp pleats and seams. A neatly tied apron at the waist was not only functional but a signature accessory, reinforcing the visual identity of the waitress role. Colors played an important part. Pale pink, sky blue, mint green, and soft yellow were among the most popular choices. These tones created an aura of freshness and optimism, reflecting the post-war mood of prosperity. White accents, collars, cuffs, or buttons gave contrast and reinforced cleanliness, a vital quality in hospitality. The palette spoke of youth, energy, and positivity, qualities directly associated with feminine beauty of the time. Another hallmark was the fit. Dresses were tailored to suggest a neat waistline without exaggeration, balancing formality with accessibility. This tailoring allowed waitresses to stand and walk with assured posture, giving them presence in the room. Shoes, typically low-heeled pumps or sturdy lace-ups, ensured both elegance and practicality, enabling long shifts on tiled floors. Hair was often styled neatly, soft curls or pinned buns that stayed in place through hours of work. The result was a harmonious ensemble, where every detail contributed to the impression of feminine grace combined with professional skill. Accessories completed the picture. Some diners encouraged name badges, small pins that added a personal connection between waitress and customer. Others allowed subtle jewelry, like simple stud earrings, but the emphasis remained on a polished and approachable look. Stockings were usually part of the attire, ensuring a smooth and professional leg line that matched the rest of the uniform. In every element, the goal was the same: to create an image of women who embodied elegance, presence, and hospitality in equal measure. One fascinating curiosity lies in the way these uniforms were supplied. By the mid-1950s, specialized companies like White Stag and Aramark began producing standardized waitress outfits. offering catalogs that allowed diner owners to choose colors and designs. This early form of uniform branding ensured that a chain of diners could project a consistent image across different locations. It also meant that the feminine beauty of the waitress uniform became instantly recognizable from coast to coast. Whether in a small-town roadside diner in Kansas or a busy city spot in Chicago, customers could expect to see women in neat pastel dresses, aprons tied, and smiles ready. The combination of fabric, silhouette, and accessories gave the diner waitress her distinctive presence. But it was not only about the clothes. It was about how women inhabited them. Their posture, shoulders back, head high, balanced movements gave dignity to roles that might otherwise have been seen as ordinary. They transformed uniforms into symbols of elegance. The way they carried trays, leaned slightly to listen to customers, or wrote down orders with efficient precision, all became part of the choreography of service. It was beauty in motion, an artistry of everyday gestures. By the end of Part 1, we can already see how the look of diner waitresses in the 1950s set the stage for something larger. The style was not just practical attire, it was a statement of feminine presence in public life. The next step is to understand how this look extended into the culture of diners themselves, shaping rituals, routines, and memories that would stay with generations of Americans. Once again, we return to the 1950s, celebrating feminine beauty in the everyday world of diner waitresses and their remarkable presence. To complete the look, we notice that details made all the difference. Piping along the edges of collars, embroidered initials on aprons, and carefully pressed pleats elevated what could have been merely functional clothing into something more graceful. The feminine beauty of the uniform shone in how it balanced practicality with dignity. Even the starched fabric, which sometimes felt stiff, contributed to a sense of formality that matched the role. These garments framed women as reliable, efficient, and elegant, qualities that carried strong cultural weight in the diner era. Small variations across diners highlighted individuality while keeping the shared identity intact. In some establishments, pastel tones were replaced by bold stripes, while others experimented with caps or headpiece is reminiscent of nurses' attire. Reinforcing ideas of professionalism, yet, whether in stripes, solids, or muted checks, the essence was constant. Women whose uniforms embodied poise's order and a welcoming smile. The conclusion of the look was not just what they wore, but how they wore it, with posture, assurance, and a quiet pride in their role. But the diner was never just about fabric and form. It was about culture, ritual, and memory. And here the feminine presence of waitress is played a defining role. Diners in the 1950s were meeting points for a society in motion. Soldiers returning from war, young couples dating on Friday nights, families enjoying a meal after church. All found themselves greeted by women who shaped the rhythm of these spaces. Their uniforms gave them authority, while their smiles gave warmth. The settings of the time were unmistakable. Chrome stools lined along counters, checkered floors reflecting neon lights, and jukeboxes filling the air with hits from Elvis Presley and Doris Day. Into this sensory landscape stepped the waitress, balancing trays of milkshakes, burgers, and coffee cups with a practiced grace. She was not background decoration. She was the anchor of the scene, the person who transformed a public space into something that felt almost like home. Etiquette in diners was a language of its own, and women set the tone. A gentle honey or darlin', offered with sincerity, softened interactions and created trust. Menace were recited with speed and precision. Orders scribbled with swift strokes of a pencil onto order pads. Plates arrived stacked, cups refilled without needing to ask, and napkins adjusted just so. Each gesture carried a ritual quality, repeated day after day, shift after shift. until it became a cultural memory. Feminine beauty in this setting was not only visual, it was in the cadence of words, the choreography of movement, and the steadiness of demeanor under pressure. Magazines of the period occasionally captured these women, though rarely in glossy spreads. Instead, they appeared in local ads or small-town papers, where their faces were linked to slogans about friendliness and service. A 1956 advertisement for a highway diner outside St. Louis highlighted its smiling uniformed girls ready to serve you day and night. Such phrasing reflected how feminine presence was woven into the very identity of diners, making them distinct from other eating establishments. The culture also extended into music and film. Popular songs referenced waitresses as part of everyday Americana. While movies often set pivotal scenes in diners, where women in uniforms symbolized reliability and charm. For teenagers, the diner became the backdrop of first dates, first dances, and first rebellions, with the waitress as a quiet witness and sometimes a friendly confidant. For truck drivers and travelers, she was the consistent face along endless miles of road. The person who greeted them with a hot meal and a reassuring word. At the same time, working in a diner demanded stamina and skill. Shifts could run 10 or 12 hours, with little rest. Yet women carried themselves with an elegance that concealed fatigue. Customers rarely saw the strain behind the smile. Instead, what they remembered was the grace under pressure, the calmness in chaos, the ability to balance 5 plates at once without losing composure. That, too, was feminine beauty. Expressed not in fragility, but in strength, posture, and assurance. The culture of diners in the 1950s thus became inseparable from the women who served in them. They were the rhythm of the morning rush, the background of late-night gatherings, and the unspoken hosts of countless conversations that shaped American memory. The jukebox might have supplied the soundtrack, but it was the waitress who gave the diner its living presence. By the end of the decade, diners were more than places to eat. They were symbols of community, mobility, and continuity. And at the center stood women whose uniforms, smiles, and service gave form to the entire experience. Their beauty was not an ornament, but a force, an active element shaping the social fabric of mid-century America. This cultural imprint leads us to ask, why did this style of feminine presence resonate so deeply beyond the walls of the diner? Why did uniforms, smiles, and posture influence not just the customers of 1957, but broader trends in advertising, television, and even fashion itself? As we move forward, we will see how the impact of diner waitresses extended far beyond their immediate setting, leaving traces in the way women were represented, celebrated, and remembered in American culture. Once again, we return to the 1950s, honoring feminine beauty in the form of diner waitresses and the enduring legacy of their style and presence. The impact of this look was immediate and widespread. Women in diner uniforms were not confined to the counters and booths where they worked. They became part of the collective imagination of a nation. Advertisers noticed first. Soft drink companies and coffee brands used images of smiling waitresses in pastel dresses to suggest warmth, reliability, and everyday happiness. Magazines, both national and local, echoed these themes, showing women at work in diners as emblems of service and charm. Feminine beauty here was never isolated to appearance alone. It was about confidence, posture, and the trustworthy grace with which women carried their duties. Television reinforced the influence. Sitcoms of the late 1950s frequently included diner settings, where waitresses played pivotal roles. Even when they had only a few lines, their presence was unmistakable. They represented stability, connection, and a touch of glamour within ordinary life. Viewers absorbed not only the storylines, but also the aesthetics, the neat collars, the polished hair, the aura of professionalism. By repeating these images into millions of living rooms, television spread the style far beyond the walls of actual diners. The habits of consumers were shaped as well. Families began to associate diners with comfort, not just because of food, but because of the women who gave the experience consistency. Returning to a diner meant seeing familiar faces, hearing the same greetings, and feeling welcomed in a way that extended beyond transaction. In subtle ways, a diner waitress is influenced how Americans defined hospitality itself. Their presence demonstrated that elegance and professionalism could exist in the most accessible of spaces. It is important to note that the impact was not only cultural but also aspirational. Young women saw diner waitress as examples of poise under pressure, balancing work and presentation with dignity. For many, the uniform carried a sense of belonging to a modern America that valued optimism and service. In oral histories collected decades later, women remembered their years in diners not simply as jobs, but as experiences that shaped their confidence and their sense of beauty, defined by posture, presence, and professional pride. The influence extended internationally as well. Tourists visiting the United States in the 1950s often remarked on diners as distinctly American, and part of that fascination came from the waitresses. Their uniforms, their charm, and their steady service became part of the American brand exported abroad. In movies, when directors wanted to capture a slice of America, they often placed a waitress in a pastel uniform at center stage. Thus, the impact of this feminine style crossed borders, embedding itself in global popular culture. At the climax of this story, we can identify three feminine signatures of the look. Three hallmarks that defined the presence of diner waitress is in the 1950s. First, the uniform itself. A pastel dress with white accents, an apron tied neatly at the waist, and shoes built for balance. More than fabric, it was a symbol of discipline and grace, instantly recognizable across the country. Second, the smile. Warm, genuine, and consistent. It carried emotional weight, assuring customers that they were welcome. The smile was the invisible accessory that completed the look, the human touch that elevated service into an art of presence. Third, the posture in motion. Whether standing tall behind a counter or weaving swiftly between tables, the way women carried themselves was unmistakable. Shoulders squared, head held high, movements precise yet fluid. This posture became a visible signature of feminine beauty in action. These three elements, uniform, smile, and posture, formed the triad that made diner waitresses of the 1950s unforgettable. As we reflect on their legacy, we realize that the feminine beauty they expressed was not ornamental, but structural. It shaped how people remembered meals, how they described community, and how they defined hospitality. Long after diners changed their menus, their furniture, and even their business models, the memory of women in crisp uniforms, offering service with elegance, remained the defining image. Why does it still resonate today? Because it represents a harmony rarely found, professional skill blended with warmth, efficiency balanced with grace, and presence infused with style. The diner waitress of the 1950s reminds us that beauty is not limited to stages, studios, or fashion magazines. It can live in everyday places, in routines repeated thousands of times, in gestures that turn the ordinary into something memorable. When we think of those neon signs glowing against a dark highway, when we hear the echo of jukebox tunes in our imagination, we also recall the women who stood at the center of it all. Their uniforms told us they belonged, their smiles invited us to stay, and their posture assured us that everything was under control. That synthesis of elegance and service is why diner waitress is of the 1950s continue to embody feminine beauty worth celebrating. And so, as we close this episode, we remember that feminine beauty is more than appearance. It is attitude, dignity, and the ability to transform the simplest spaces into places of warmth and connection. The legacy of 1950s diner waitress proves that uniforms, smiles, and service can leave a timeless imprint. And in celebrating them, we prepare ourselves to look at the next chapter of feminine in style and presence. Wherever history may take us.